Hey, today I have got a Q&A for you, and this Q&A was based on the Danish Bolt Action group, where I asked rookies to give me questions, and I would do a giveaway, a Christmas giveaway of a Bolt Action starter set from Warlord Games. So that is going to be given to a commenter from the Danish Bolt Action group today, now. But first, all the questions. And at the end of the video, I will roll a die and we shall see who gets it. So let's go. I made a PowerPoint. Of course I did. The final comment came in last evening. So I got 18 comments, I think. Not a lot, but not a little, because each comment was from a new player here in Denmark. Right. So here we go. Rookie Q&A. The first question was about armored cars. Are armored cars worth it now in V3? And I think absolutely yes, but with huge caveats. The commenter asked, are they too easy to pin and then not worth it? And I don't think the pins are the problem. Pins, because you have so many officers on the table now in V3, because every time you buy a new platoon you get an officer, right? Because you have to take one. And you can even take company commanders that have +4. Pins are, for me, less of a problem. I know some people will argue that they are a problem, and they can be in certain situations, and they can waste your time and precious turns on the tabletop. But for most of the games, the pins are not actually what stops the enemy, and I'm seeing people take a lot more risks with their units. Just roll the dice, see if I get it to move, and it happens a lot more than I'm used to. So for me, it's not the pins, it's whether or not your vehicle is soft-skinned, and whether or not people figure out how to deal with open-topped, because a lot of armored cars are open-topped. So what I look for when I look at armored cars, and I've got one armored car here that I absolutely love right now. This is my Humber armored car. The Humber is armed with a coaxial machine gun and a light autocannon. And it's not very armored, but it's wheeled, it's quick, it can definitely threaten stuff, and it's got recce. And it's not open-topped. It's a perfect little armored car, because small arms fire just bounces off it. Soft-skinned, which were great in V2, not so much anymore. Then we had a question about disembarking. So could you disembark from a Hanomag, for instance? Which is an especially relevant question because there is a part of this starter set where a Hanomag plays a role in one of the missions. So can you disembark from a Hanomag after the Hanomag has moved? Yes, but only if your die is set to an advance. If it's set to a run order, then you can't. So you the vehicle has to have advanced. Then you can still disembark from the vehicle. So vehicles can actually mean that you can move quite far, because you can move the vehicle first, advancing. So for a Hanomag that would be 9 inches. And then you can run out of that vehicle or advance out of that vehicle another 6 or 12 inches. So that's quite far you can get into a table if you are in a vehicle. So yes, you can. What about that Hanomag in the starter set then? Well, that Hanomag is a cardboard model of a Hanomag. It's not an official model. Are there official models in Bolt Action? No, there aren't. But there is a caveat to that. Can you then use the cardboard Hanomag in tournaments and stuff? No, you can't. And that is because for Bolt Action, we need the vehicles to be 3D. that is very, very important, that they're 3D and that they're the correct scale, 1 to 56, 28 millimeter. Why? Well, it's a matter of footprint on the table, like how much space do they actually take up on your terrain table, and how much line of sight, because line of sight goes from the head of a soldier or the gun of a vehicle and straight to an enemy. So it's really important that you actually have a profile that you can aim at and not just a cardboard cutout. And that profile has a real 3D print. So the footprint and the 3D outline of your model is really important. And of course, a flat cardboard model doesn't have any of that. So you can't use it in official tournaments. Can you use it in a home game? Yes. You can use whatever you like. Use your Lego cars if you need them. It doesn't matter. In a home game, it doesn't matter. But in a tournament setting, I would always ask the TO how much WYSIWYG is necessary. WYSIWYG is what you see is what you get. It's a term that we borrowed from, I think originally it was intended for Games Workshop games. And it's a thing. There are no official models, which I know a lot of games have official models, and you can't use stand-in or proxy. You can absolutely do that. Warlord Games is not like checking every tournament, making sure that you only use Warlord Games models. And there's a lot of really good suppliers of models out there. But they need to be the correct scale. That's the most important bit. What about army builders? Well, there are two main army builders right now. And for me, basically only one. There's Easy Army, link will be in the description, which is easy, it's quick, it's free, but has a couple of errors and is not always completely updated with the newest releases of books and stuff. It's a one-man job. It's one person that runs it. It's amazing. I love it to bits. And I use it all the time. Every single video you'll see me in where I build an army list, I'm using Easy Army. And then there's Warlord Games' own app, which is, I've been told, more accurate, equally easy to use, but it has a paywall. So you pay a subscription to use it, and then you're in. So for me, I kind of like free stuff. So I've yet to see the point for me personally in moving over to Warlord's app. But if Easy Army continues having a lot of mistakes, then maybe I'll have to at some point. But of course, absolutely best is actually using physical books. Right, so that's why you always have to have the book. So check. It's easy to build the army and get a sort of overview, and it's easy to print it out from these apps. But there's no replacement for a physical book because there may be mistakes, especially on points cost, and that is not good. So, as Alistair often says on this channel, the books. Really, that's you can't get away from it. But there'll be a link at least to Easy Army, and I possibly also will link to Warlord's app in the description for this video. So, next question: is V3 a better game than V2? And that's a difficult one. That's philosophy. That is. I'm not absolutely certain that it is, but in some ways we definitely needed V3. People were played out in V2. What's called the meta, so everyone's ideas about what was good and what could be taken, that needed a shake-up. So V3 was absolutely needed if the game was to continue having any relevance. Sorry about. And but there are potential issues for those of us who've studied the game quite a lot and who does a lot of analysis of the game. There are certain issues with V3 that need fixing. And there was also with V3 a chance to fix a lot of the things that was broken with V2, and maybe not all of it got fixed. So is it a better game? Maybe not, but it's the game. It's the World War II game. It's what it is, and in some respects, some things about the game have gotten better. I know a lot of people who are more historical than me, who say that the game is now more realistic. I personally, I'm missing the close combat, close quarters part of the game a little bit, but people will often tell me, well, it's much more realistic now. But I still think it's a design mistake not to have close combat be a thing. But, it's what it is. So, the game is what it is. And I've been through enough editions of Warhammer 40k to know that the game changes with each new edition. The benefit of bold action compared to Games Workshop games, 40k for instance, is that the game doesn't change every time a book comes out. There's no power creep. There's no pay to win. I need the newest army and the newest units every single time because that will make me win. That's not really what bold action is. So you can absolutely field that rulebook army, and if you're good, you can still do well with it. Although there is meta. Every single game, especially games that have points, and so if you pay points for your units, and as soon as you do that, there is something that's points for value better. Just happens every time, so you get the meta. But I think it's in many respects a better game. Next question: can bold action be played solo? And I think perhaps also the questioner meant if this starter set can be played solo. And yes, you absolutely can. The missions in the starter set they're designed for 2 players, but they are so simple that you can absolutely play them out yourself, because it's basically a matter of playing through the mechanics of the game. I have this unit and you have that unit. This unit is pinned, that unit isn't. That unit's mission is now to get unpinned while the other unit shoots at it. So in that respect, yes, you can absolutely play that bold action starter set solo, but you can also play it two people and learn the rules by playing the game. What about bold action, like the big game? Can you play that solo? Yes, and there have been attempts at making rules for that. They don't really work. The best you can do is a random order generator, basically, that gives random units an order. The problem is that bold action is a game of bluff. You have secret ideas, secret plans, and those plans matter in the game because they inform your the order in which you do things. And if you don't have that, because you're playing both sides, then it becomes a little bit more. I will say though that for training exercises, which I do a lot because tournaments and stuff, you absolutely can play bold action solo. It's not always I need an opponent. I do a lot of deployment. I do a lot of list reflections where I sort of take an opponent's list and deploy it on the game, maybe play a turn or two against that list, just to figure out what is it that actually works and how would that opponent move that list. So yes, you can play it, but it's not set up to be a solo game at all. It's a social contract. That's where it really shines. Next question. Air support in V3. Are airplanes better? Yes. You can go and watch my video with Alistair. He absolutely crushed it with his air supremacy list. But it is mostly for nations where you get a double tab with your forward air observer. That is where it really shines. A single shot with an airplane for 75 points, nah, it's maybe too expensive, I think. But double shots, absolutely worth it. Absolutely. It's much, much better. And it's also very, very deadly. So compared to a forward artillery observer, which has a splash effect with a huge, potentially a huge footprint, where you can pin stuff down and maybe kill stuff, but it doesn't happen that often. The air support is now very much a guaranteed kill. But you need the enemy to stay at range in order to do that. Because the risk is there, if the enemy is close to you, that they can transfer that hit to you. It's not as bad as it was in V2, where if you rolled a 1 and got a rookie pilot, then everything was basically, that was it. But now it is, you need to shoot in the enemy's back line most of the time. Next questions. What about the factions? Factions is more or less a Games Workshop term. The different nations. Are they all supported? Can you play all of them? Well, not really. Not yet. But they will be. We have, for V3 in the rulebook, we have the starter nations, the major 6. The major 6. So you have a simplified version of the USA, a simplified version of Germany, you have a simplified version of the Soviets without Lend-Lease, which a lot of people were complaining about, which I get. You have a simplified version of Great Britain, Italy and Japan. There are no minor nations in the rulebook, but they have been released as PDFs. A lot of them, but not all of them. So all nations... No, not all. Most nations for World War II bold action is now supported, but in a very, very limited way. The amount of units you can choose in each one is very limited. And there's, like, all the specialty is sort of gone. But I do like the new way that they've set up how to build your armored cars and tanks. Because they've made it all so it's in one box, and then you just buy upgrades in order to make it the different types of armored cars and tanks. So that's really neat. So yes, supported, most of it, but in a limited way. So what to expect going forward? Well, we expect that once the Armies of books start coming out, that there'll be a lot more depth. We've already seen intelligence reports from Marcus Vine of Warlord Games about what is in the new books. We expect there to be more nations, we expect there to be more units, and we expect also the game to sort of divide into early, mid and late war, so that you can, for your tournament, just simply say we're playing late war 1250, 24 order dice max, whatever. That will now be a thing, which is sort of similar to Flames of War, I guess, and a neat new feature of what we expect. I also expect there to be more nations coming out. I think Warlord Games is going to try and cover the nations that they had in V2, all of them. Right now they're still missing quite a few, but not nations that were massively played. I expect all of them to come out at some point. Not necessarily with with individual armies of books. Maybe they'll group some of the minor nations together. I would expect that to happen. Or they'll do like they did in V2, they'll release theatre books where each theatre book will have 1 or 2 new nations. And I also expect there to be a lot more units coming out. Next question. Playstyle and nations. How do you decide which nation you want to play based on your playstyle? Well, there's no real replacement for actually testing this out. You're going to have to test it. You're going to have to play games. That's just it. Because your playstyle is basically what you like and what you feel comfortable with. So that's something you test, not something you can sort of figure out in advance. And I will say this also. Version 3 is still very unsettled. It's not clear yet what the game is going to be. People are testing out, trying out very different things, and having great success with it. So we've already seen early success for Armor, but is that going to continue? We don't know. Everything is up in the air. I will say that the Force organization gives a lot of options, which means that for almost all of the nations you can play right now, I think a lot of them have very similar options to build very similar builds. Right now, the difference between the nations isn't that great, as it has been, but I expect it will get bigger once we get into a more settled meta. I think that the difference between different nations will get bigger. And of course the army books will change everything up. So waiting on those. So this is not a clear answer, I know, but it's the best one we have right now. I think with most nations you can play most builds, but there are some nations where you need, like I talked about earlier, if you want to play air supremacy, then you need access to double tab air observers. If you want to play armor, then you need somewhere where you can get cheap armor that's good, right? But most nations have access to some that's good. So we shall see what happens. It's unclear as of yet. But play games and figure out what you like. Is it armor? Is it infantry? Is it skirmishing? Is it big guns? What? Yeah. Next question. How much terrain do you actually need for a game of bold action? And how do you set it up? Well, you need quite a lot of terrain, and a big part of the hobby, for me at least, has turned into making terrain. I like that. But it's pretty easy to make and build, actually. If you got a bunch of old CDs, that's a really good way of getting access to something where you can like make a little round piece of terrain, and just some PVA glue, and you can buy that in most craft stores, and even like Home Depot and stuff. Get some sand, go to your local beach if you have one, and pick up some sand or gravel, and some craft paint. If you got those 4 things, you can easily build terrain. Just take the CD, apply PVA, sand and gravel, and then paint. The next thing you need to do is get yourself some moss. I've got this lichen that I usually buy at Christmas, because that will give you a lot of like what we call scatter terrain. Also, go and see if you can get yourself some train track trees. This is one of mine. By the way, the base done exactly like I told you with the CDs. PVA, gravel, paint. That's it. And then the tree is just applied to it. Because these trees and the moss lichen things will definitely mean that you have enough scatter. And once you have these round bases, you can put them next to each other, and then you have a forest, right? We need the outlines, so that's the easiest way to get more terrain. Then at some point you buy houses, right? This is one of my very lovely Waterloo houses here that I've used for everything. You get houses at some point. It's really easy to get MDF cutout houses and ruins, and even in like the starter set that I'm giving away today, there's 2 ruined buildings. So yeah. How much do you need then, and how do you set it up? You need quite a lot. For me, I think V3 needs 16 pieces of terrain on the board or more. Ideally between 16 and 20. And a piece of terrain for me is 1 house or 3 pieces of wall, or 1 forest like this big, with the outlines of the CDs and then a couple of trees and some lichen stuck in it, and it looks like a forest. That's a piece of terrain. Why do you need that much? Because shooting is now very, very deadly. So people need to be able to get some cover saves. How do you set it up? For me, I often set it up at a little bit of an angle on the table, and I also try to make sure that most of the line of sight blockers are in the center of the table, so a couple of inches or up to 6 inches in from the edge. And then once I've set up the line of sight blockers, I go and pull down linear obstacles and then scatter terrain, which is, little bits of clump foliage that just go down somewhere and just means soft cover or whatever, depending on how you sort of agree. I've made quite a few terrain videos in which I set up a table, so you can go and watch some of those if you want to. And yeah, so that's how you set up terrain. It sort of turns into an exercise in figuring out the balance between open ground and not open ground, because you still need somewhere to move your miniatures, but you also need them to be able to be sort of safe, because then if you're just moving across a bare tabletop, which by the way I have seen done and have heard about people who went to tournaments and then just got a table with no terrain on it, you know what happens? Everything dies immediately. Everything dies immediately. If you put it on the table, it gets shot, it dies. And that's not a fun game. Next question. What about conceding? If you lose half your army in turn 3, then, it's not a fun game anymore. Can't you just give up and go home? Yes. There are 2 problems. There's the problem of playing on, and there's the problem of conceding. If you get stuck in a game where you have no chance, then that is not a fun game. However, if you're at an event where the results of the game matter, then conceding will actually mess up your own chances and that of your opponent. So, most tournaments that I'm at, the TO will absolutely say, you never give up. You fight till the death, the very last dice. But in a friendly game, I would just, and I do this all the time, say, well, I don't think I can do any more. Are we in agreement? Do you see the same as me, that this is like that? And then, so basically I have no chance now. And if the opponent agrees, we're like, well, we have 2 hours more. Should we just start another game? And that's perfectly fine, right? You start over and try again. But in a tournament setting, I think you should fight to the very, very last minute, the very last pull of dice, because you both actually need that to work. And if you can see that you can't win, you know what you can do? you can just castle up in a corner, go on ambush with everything, and just try and push the enemy off. Hope for the best. Which is what they'll do in real life if they're really pressured. The soldiers, they'll just hunker down and try and see if they can survive. That turns into the game. Can I survive? So yeah. FAQ. Is there a new FAQ? Yes, there is. Now in V2, the FAQ ended up being thicker than the rulebook. That was a joke, really, but it was 100+ pages, right? The FAQ, frequently asked questions from all the games. It was really, really long. In V3, it's really short, but we're in early days. My main concern with the V3 FAQ right now is that most of the issues that were dealt with in the V2 FAQ are now missing in action. They're gone. We don't have them anymore. So, for instance, one thing that was cleared up in the FAQ in V2 was, can you take officers on horseback? And in V2 they said, yes, if you have a cavalry unit in your army, then your officer can of course take a horse as well. Giving you the option of building, Soviet Cossack units or whatever. Now, gone. It's gone. So there was a lot of these things that were dealt with in version 2 that are now gone. Another good example of that is the dog mines. In version 2, it's really clear that a dog mine is like a heat-seeking missile, and it could absolutely shoot anything. You always hit on a 4+. Now, it says that it's a shot in the rulebook, which means that potentially someone would argue that you can get cover saves from that shot, which makes no sense since the dog will absolutely run around the cover. But it's not clear anymore, and so once you change stuff, new facts are needed, new rulings are needed from all the games, and these will, I guess, crop up slowly. You can go and write to Warlord, and they'll consider putting it in the FAQ. But also the old questions sort of have gone as well. So I expect the FAQ to grow over time quite a lot, and I will link in the description. Next question. Introduction games. What is a good setting for introduction points? Well, I think you should start at 400 points-ish. 400 points does not give you enough to have multiple vehicles. So 400 points is basically an infantry game, which, is what the game should maybe be about, maybe. So I think 400 points is nice, and then you advance, you add more points. I also think 400 is something where if you buy a starter set, not the introduction set here that I'm giving away today, but if you buy a starter box, a starter army, 400 points is absolutely doable with a starter box for all of them. So and then you can add on as you go along up to 750, and there you can start including vehicles. I would suggest maybe at the start just ignoring the force organization chart for tanks and just getting one vehicle. You can't really do that right now. You need 2 vehicles if you buy an armor platoon, but that's just dumb. So for introduction, that's my recommendation. Next question: version 2 versus version 3. What has changed? Long range fire has massively become more important. In version 2, it was not really that important, which meant that LMGs, for instance, and MMGs were not a thing. Now I'm seeing them quite often. And that's because long range fire is now a lot more accurate. You can start hitting the enemy in their deployment zone. From turn 1, the enemy gets hit. That has happened in all the games I've played so far, that something has gotten hit in turn 1. Maybe not killed, but hit at least. So that has changed quite dramatically. Close quarters has more or less disappeared now. In V2, I play close quarters all the time. And now it's sort of gone. And I miss it, I must say. I miss it. It did something for me, something nice for the game that balanced out shooting. And I think that balance has now completely gone. That's my personal feeling of the game. Your opinion, of course, can be different. I'm not I'm not an oracle or prophet here. I'm just saying how I feel about that. And in version 2, you could also feel fairly safe in your own deployment zone, right? It was really hard for the enemy to get you. Now, you're not safe anywhere on that table, which is why I am suggesting a lot more terrain is needed. The main difference, other than that, I think, other than long-range fire now being a lot better, is the cover saves, and those two are related. I think that when the playtesters sat down and the rules writers sat down, I think these two issues were up in their minds at the same time. Cover saves now that's a huge change. Mathematically, it doesn't make that much difference whether you do it in the version 2 way or the version 3 way, but cover matters quite a lot now. And if you're down and in hard cover, you can be pretty goddamn safe that you're not going to get killed from most things. So modifying that cover save becomes really important. And there are certain weapons that can ignore the cover save, and that's really good now. So next question. 1250 points, is that how much order dice do you take at 1250? This is a difficult question to answer as well. Version 3, as I said, is a problem because of the way the force organization chart is set up. It means that you can spam units. And at 1250, you can absolutely go above 30 order dice. But is that good? We don't know that yet because of what I've been talking about, the unsettled meta. Everything is up in the air and everyone is trying out a lot of different things. So it depends on your build. How many order dice do you aim for with a 1250 list? That really depends on your build. We shall see once we get a lot more tournaments going, and we can see how many order dice do the winners or the top lists have. Then we know what to aim for. But right now we don't. My guess is that it would be somewhere in the 18 to 28 order dice range, thereabouts. But I am not absolutely sure about this. We shall see. So when do you start playing bold action? Well, you can play simple versions with your kids and their toy soldiers from very early on. But I think that a child needs to understand the social contract of we roll the dice and the dice decide whether or not this happens. That needs to set. They need to understand that this is a game that is played where the dice decide the outcome, not the player. Otherwise, it quickly turns into my tank rolls up, shoots your tank, and it's dead. And then you're playing around with your toy soldiers, which is cool, but it's not a game then. So for me, I think kids sort of can understand that social contract at different ages, but I would suggest that maybe 8 to 9 is an appropriate age before you can play the game with your kids. I will say that the hobby as it is right now is a hobby dominated by men of a certain age. So a lot of players are above 30 and male. That's just the most typical bolt action player. I think there's something in us reliving our childhoods with the toy soldiers, but there's also something in the history part of this, where military history, World War II history, is a male pursuit, and an adult male pursuit. So if you're playing around with your kid, you should at least be aware that these adult men are who your kid is going to be playing with, and that's just how it is. How long and in that question, the questionnaire asked, how long does a game typically take? Well, a very small game, 100 points, which is what is in the starter set, should be over in 15 minutes. It can really be done really quickly. A little bit larger, for 400 points, 500 points, you can do that in an hour. So the standard length of time that would take you to play any sort of board game. If you're going to a full tournament game of 1,000 points or more, then you need 2.5 hours or more. So yeah, that's how long the game takes. For 1250 games, you can go to 3 hours. Yeah. So that was it. That was the questions. Thank you all the Danish bolt action rookies that sent in questions. And thank you Warlord Games for the sponsor gift, which here at the end I will give away. So we need to just adapt here a little bit. Just a sec. So I have a box here, and in that box I have a dice. I have a 20-sided dice. Right, here we go. I'll roll the dice, and there were 18 comments, so if it's a 19 or a 20, I'll re-roll. It's a 3. And now I will go to the comment section, and I will find comment number 3, and that person has won the set. So let's see, comments. Here we go. Video comments. And you guys should be able to see it. So we have comment number, wait a minute, I'll just update. Comment number 3. So, is it a solo game? That was the first comment. And then how much terrain and how you set it up. That was the second comment. And here we go. Graham for real. I don't know who this is. Graham for real. Please get in contact with me. Write me. PM me. And that was the question of the Disembark from a Hanomag. That's it. You have won the Bolt Action Starter Set. I will send it to you once you've contacted me and we can arrange the details. Thank you so much for tuning in today. That was it for me, and I hope you all enjoy your day. If anyone on the international community have questions, write them in the comments and I will respond. Cheers.